For a time, I considered sparing you the sight of another nerd talking about Man of Steel on the internet. It would have been a mercy. Superman's a big boy. He doesn't need people like me defending him. That's what the WB's lawyers are for. If they'd ever stop going after his creator's descendants. Or random YouTubers who might, I don't know, want to show clips of the thing they're discussing as they're discussing it to help illustrate their rhetorical points. You could have all stayed safe, with your beliefs unchallenged and your preconceived notions intact. Another mercy. But it seems the mercies of Mongol are not appreciated, so we will do this the hard way. And I will review Man of Steel again. On June 14th, 2013, the first Superman movie in 7 years debuted. And I was there, 4th row center, at my local cheap theater of choice. I thoroughly enjoyed all 2 hours and 45 minutes of that $6.50 early bird showing. But about 10 minutes before the end, I knew, with the absolute certainty of a Jedi Master sensing a planet's destruction through the Force, that these would be my last happy Superman-related moments for quite some time. The film seemed to know this too, with its faster-than-a-speeding-bullet denouement, made out of 100% certified grade A fan service. As if the filmmakers knew they'd just opened up a can of worms they'd need an entire other film to even begin sorting out. Maybe they just figured, fuck it. People will either like it or hate us, and they hate us already. We're Zack Snyder, director of Watchmen, and David S. Goyer, writer of the Dark Knight trilogy. Perhaps that was the point all along. Might as well hack the Hatrix ahead of time and get everybody talking, even if they're only talking about the wrong things. Better that than if the people spend a month talking about the right things and then completely forget your film ever existed. As far as my corner of the internet is concerned, it arrived rotten. A box of Superman cereal with pentagonal S's made out of cut glass instead of whole grain oats. Now granted, some in my circles are predisposed to hate Superman and wish he would just fucking die again so Batman can have all of the spotlight to himself. Others were predisposed to hate this film the moment they saw its first trailer, and proudly said so, in public, months before writing their perfunctory at best reviews. But by a large margin, it was my fellow superfans who fired the most vicious volleys across this movie's bow. There are times when to be a Superman fan is to feel all alone, trapped on a planet of Bat fans and Punishers. And yet, suddenly, there they all were. My tribe. My people, having fun in full daylight. I should have been in Kryptonian heaven, hanging out with Jor-El and Supergirl's folks. But the more I read, the more my heart sank at the state of movie criticism in general, and at my fellow superfans' ability to even watch a movie in particular. It got to the point where I started to feel like I truly lived in a parallel dimension, and we really did not watch the same film. Stacked against every Superman origin story of the previous 10 years, and believe me, there are a lot of them, Man of Steel towers head and shoulders above them all, combining elements from all 75 years of Superman's mythology into something that's as new as this material can honestly ever be. If you don't know your Superman, and there are a lot of people who don't, then this is a perfectly serviceable introduction to him. And if you do know your Superman, then this film is densely packed with material many of us never thought we'd see in live action. Seeing it will either make you rejoice and be exceeding glad, or declare this the worst Superman film ever made. Or even worse, not a Superman film at all. I rejoiced, which turned out to suck for me, because I couldn't share my rejoicing with anyone who actually cared. They were too busy, either talking about the film's least interesting aspects, or being morally outraged by what I considered to be its highest high points. Me being me, I wasted a lot of time wondering how this could happen. But you probably don't care about any of that. You're watching a film review on the internet. So I'm sure you're just dying to watch me relitigate all the same points everyone else has already run into the ground. I must say first, though, that Warner Brothers obviously wanted a feel-good summer blockbuster production out of all this, packed with more fan service than Dark Souls 3, but dumb enough for the entire family to enjoy. Except they also promised, publicly and often, that this would be a filmmaker-driven project. A not-so-sly shot across the bow of Marvel Studios, where all decisions apparently flow from and through studio president Kevin Feige. And the filmmaker they chose to drive this train was none other than Zack Snyder, a man whose previous films have inspired more hate from more angles than any other modern director, apart from Snyder's former film school classmate, Michael Bay. Much has been made of the fact they went to the same school, ignoring the dramatic contrasts between them. Madman Mike clearly doesn't give a fuck what we say or do or think about him, and he's said as much, from the stage at the San Diego Comic-Con, no less. But it seems like Snyder, against all notions of good sense, actually pays some attention to his critics. I know it doesn't feel that way to some of you, but to me, everything he's made since 300 feels like part of an ongoing dialectic. One that, as of this writing, is almost completely one-sided, because asking people to read a film is harder than asking them to read a comic book. I've read all your reviews, though. Line them all up and certain patterns begin to emerge. Some criticisms are specific to this film, but an astonishing number of them are the same kinds of crap we superfans learn to deal with the moment we get to an elementary school playground. Certain things like, Superman is boring. And I can't help you there, partner. If that's how you feel, don't let the door hit you where Great Row split you. I personally felt this was as poignant and heartfelt a retelling of Kal-El's first 3 decades of life on Earth as you can probably get away with these days. There's too much action in this action sci-fi summer blockbuster superhero film. Really? It adheres to the same action scene every 15-minute rule that every other movie that costs more than $100 million adheres to these days, and if that's your beef, then we're in complete agreement. That rule's fucking stupid. Especially since it leads to situations like this, where a slow drip of small action beats throughout the first half makes the whole thing feel lopsided once you get to the other side of the inevitable hour-long climax. Which is also something everything seems to have these days, whether it needs it or not. In other words, this movie's got a fat ass, but it's an ass I find attractive. As a dedicated hater of the series Smallville, from the first season, thank you very much, original gangster. Seeing large chunks of that town destroyed was beyond cathartic for me. You don't even know. As a Midwesterner, I watched A-10 tank killers fly right over my house for most of my life. And I imagined scenes very much like this one, livening up the small towns where I bought my comic books. Sweet Jesus, they even did super speed right. I was afraid they'd be lazy and go full bullet time. I mean, look who we're dealing with here. But they didn't. And there's this moment in the IHOP where Clark's like, Pete? And Pete's all like, Clark? And then Fiora decks him, and it's so good. Look at that oh shit face when he realizes he's never had a real fight in his life. How could you hate that face? Who would dare to call it unexpressive? Oh, right. Everybody but me, Armin White, and a few dedicated fangirls campaigning for Henry Cavill to be the next James Bond. I know why they picked him. One look at that goofy grin was all I needed to see. And then he puts on the suit and he makes it look good. Even without the pants, much as I miss him. I should have known the discourse around this movie was going to turn into a trash fire the moment they announced Cavill's casting. And all the dumbass nationalists among Superman fandom immediately declared it un-American. As in, you can't let a Brit play Superman, that's just un-American. All right. But you must admit, all this time spent on Krypton is superfluous and stupid. No, I mustn't. But maybe I don't take issue with the movie's prologue, because I had a decent library growing up, from which I checked out and read dozens of the pulp adventure books that directly precede modern superhero comics, including the 2 series most directly responsible for the creation of Superman. John Carter, of Mars, damn it, was the several times over savior of his adopted homeworld, gifted with superpowers by the unique interaction of his environment and alien physiology. Doc Savage, on the other hand, was a physical, moral, and intellectual paragon of humanity, with a secret fortress in the Arctic, full of homemade sci-fi gadgets and souvenirs of his various adventures. Put them together and you get Superman. I would have been disappointed if his dad didn't turn out to be a scientist, adventurer, pulp hero. Instead, I love this Krypton. It looks more H.R. Geiger than anything in Prometheus. Everything seems to be made of bones. The entire planet looks calcified and covered over with volcanic ash. Baked solid by an angry sun that's the kind of orange-red you don't see anywhere unless you live under a toxic smog cloud, like in L.A., reflecting the static nature of a civilization that's destroyed itself by literally sucking the life out of their own planet. The kind of civilization that makes good old-fashioned getting your bone on not just a crime, but heresy. A society so full of pigeonholes it makes Imperial China look like the modern United States. Against this, we have Jor-El. No longer a supercilious Broadway veteran, so bored he had to have his lines written on cue cards, but as a man who'd build a rocket in his attic and kick your ass while it launched. And if you don't have a father willing to do this, sorry to say, but you don't actually have a father, no matter how much sperm he donated. It took Chris Nolan 2 Batman movies and 1 Inception before he could film a fist fight as well as the fist fight here between Jor-El and Zod. The only problem I have, and believe me, I have it every time, is with the camera's unwillingness to lock itself down. And that's the one big bitch I'd pitch about this movie. Someone behind the camera was overcompensating. Someone seemed to know that, no matter how good a job he did, people were just going to say he's made yet another special effects heavy superhero movie without the brains, heart, or soul God gave your average dishwasher. So someone, I'm pretty sure I know who, decided to film as much of this movie as they could with handheld cameras, and fake it the rest of the time by crash zooming through digital shots, like Firefly. Because this aesthetic is still, unfortunately, considered realistic, even after a decade of shitty found footage movies pissing in the pond. But that's a whole other rant right there. Let me instead praise Michael Shannon as General Zod. No, he doesn't project the stone-cold killer vibe Terrence Stamp put out just by standing center frame. But that's a good thing. This is a different Zod who's come to us with a new face. No longer the two-dimensional world conqueror, this Zod reminds me a little bit of Fletcher Christian, at least here at the start, committing mutiny against a planetary government full of Captain Blighs, whose ignorant stupidity and bold-faced denial of the obvious has clearly unhinged his mind. And his last words to the Kryptonian Council hint that Zod used to be much more like them than he's comfortable admitting. Probably, especially to himself. Imagine, you're the head of an isolationist society's armed forces. Pretty much nothing to do with your time. Along comes an idealistic scientist who tells you, yeah, we're all gonna die, and the people up top aren't even trying to hear it. After a while, you might start to think about taking this whole sumbitch over. After all, what else are you gonna do? Have sex? That's what the L's did. Parallelism is key, as ever. Superman's story here is the story of learning to open up, trust, and allow some glimmer of hope for a better tomorrow to shine through that gray filter someone stuck on the camera lens. Zod's story is all about the death of hope, about watching your dreams turn into handfuls of ash, and being so goddamn mad about it you just want to throw someone through a block's worth of skyscrapers. Reminds me of certain segments of Superman's fan base, now that I think about it, especially in the wake of this movie. And none of it would be anywhere near as awesome without this prologue. Seriously, am I the only one who read a King Arthur story? I mean, you know the first bit is always about his parents, right? That's been true ever since... Where the fuck is it? Oh yeah, that's been true ever since this one, right? Yeah, here it is. King Uther Pendragon, ruler of all Britain, had been at war for many years with the Duke of Tenangle in Cornwall, where he was told of the beauty of the Lady Igraine, the Duke's wife. And I'm sorry, but damn, Superman's mom is hot. Except I'm not sorry. No, you're clearly not. But Jonathan Kent should be right about everything, all the time. Ah, now we get into the fat middle part that every Zack Snyder movie seems to have. Clark Kent's journey to finding an old Kryptonian scout ship, and his process of dealing with what he finds inside, is occasionally interrupted with flashbacks to his childhood. Like any memories, Clark's here are triggered by association. His rescue of the not Deepwater Horizon's crew triggers the memory of when his super senses first kicked in. Seeing a school bus once he gets back on shore and provides more fan service reminds him of that time he pulled a school bus out of a river as a teenager. Zod's worldwide ultimatum reminds him of this time his dad talked to him about bullies, and how best to deal with them when you can literally take their heads off. I honestly don't see the problem here, unless of course your problem is, this movie's structured slightly differently from Richard Donner's, which was the not-so-subtle subtext and occasional outright text running through a lot of people's negative reviews. Snyder could have copied that flick beat for beat and would have probably gotten more love from his supposed target audience. Which is ironic because he probably figured if he did that, they'd all immediately call for his summary dismissal. Then again, he still might have caught shit. Because there's this one scene after Clark saves the bus that made everyone lose their goddamn minds. We dare not call him Superboy. Asks his father, what was I supposed to do? Just let him die? And his father pauses a moment before answering, maybe. That, believe it or fucking not, was the maybe heard round the world. Because God forbid Jonathan Kent not have all the answers at all times. God forbid he admit that he's doing the best he can and making this up as he goes along. A line my mother laughed out loud at because she recognized its truth. God forbid he have a moment of doubt and pain, like the kind that plague most human parents when they try to tell 14-year-olds what to do with their lives. For real though, half of y'all acted like he said yes. It's not like he's trying to be a child murderer. He's trying to be humble, in the hope, desperate though it might be, that his superpowered child will absorb some of that humbleness through osmosis. And if you step back a second, you can see this whole film as a dialectic between Superman's two dads. Both of them spend their lives, and afterlives in Jor-El's case, heaping entirely unrealistic expectations onto their son. Jor-El wants the kid to be, as his holographic ghost says, a bridge between two peoples. A walking, talking goodwill ambassador for a civilization that Cal would only know secondhand at best. It's exactly the kind of plant I'd expect a super scientist with a hard-on for hope to cook up. Provided said super scientist is also an alien. Jor-El's like one of those people who only know superheroes from watching movies. His knowledge of humanity limited to whatever his planet scanners told him from Rao knows how many light years away. He hedges a little bit in front of his wife and calls us a seemingly intelligent population. But the very optimism that leads him to shoot his kid into space also leads him to believe the best about our species. Sight unseen. Pa Kent, on the other hand, knows humans all too well, having grown up right in the thick of them. Hence the fears he holds for, and transmits down to, his son. He and I would probably agree that the key word in Jor-El's reading of our species is seemingly. A seemingly intelligent population doesn't mean an actually intelligent one, as recent events keep proving over and over again. Jonathan Kent's tombstone says he died in 1997, which was the year Men in Black came out. And as the best line in Men in Black taught us, a person is smart. People are violent, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. This version of Jonathan embraces Agent K's ethos, and he raised this version of Clark during the age of the X-Files, an alien autopsy. Remember Alien Autopsy? If you don't, or if you weren't born then, look it up. And then imagine watching that shit when your kid actually is an alien. Betcha that caused a few sleepless nights in the Kent household. And I'll bet Jonathan spent the rest of his life seeing that whenever he closed his eyes for too long. Except with his own child in place of that rubber alien puppet. That's what that maybe really means. Maybe Because what the fuck are you gonna do when the black helicopters swarm our house? Best case scenario, Clark winds up spending the rest of his life trapped in an underground lab, and then this whole thing becomes the Flashpoint universe. Which... no. Okay? Just no. Even Jonathan insists that his son will change the world by his mere existence. Like the rest of us, this leaves Clark more or less flapping in the breeze for 15-odd years, confused and questioning his place in a world that's not technically his, until a third father figure moves into stationary orbit and challenges both Jor-El and Jonathan's dreams, with one based on absolutism, eugenics, and genocide. And now I have to fight every single one of my best instincts and actually praise Geoff Johns. Yeah, I know. I couldn't believe it either. That even a broken watch is right twice a day, unless it's an Apple Watch. So on top of all the other awesome things in this movie, it comes with the best pair of lines Geoff Johns ever put in a comic book. Clark asks his father, "Can I just keep pretending I'm your son?" And his father says the only thing a true father would say, or should say, "You are my son." And God damn it, it's so beautiful it almost made me cry. Because this Superman is not the perpetual outsider, looking down on us from on high, Brian. Nor, going by the Tarantino reading that's sadly become popular, is he stealth parodying us by pretending to be Clark Kent. He is Clark Kent. An otherwise ordinary dude, raised to do the right thing by decent parents. An element of his backstory that's extremely hard for anyone without parents to accept. It's the antithesis of Richard Donner's "you will look like one of them, but you will not be one of them" shtick that became a millstone around Superman's neck from the moment Marlon Brando said it. I'm glad a movie finally decided to throw off that horrible weight and give us a Superman that's much closer to the one I found in comic books as a child. That Superman, and this one, was a character I found much more relatable than any other superhero on the market, then or now. I realize that's only because I'm lucky enough to be a Midwesterner raised by New Deal Democrats. But goddammit, it's high time we got some representation in Hollywood. Aren't you tired of rooting for billionaires? I know you are. I watched a lot of you piss all over Dark Knight Rises when it came out, and call it some kind of conservative propaganda, even though it's clearly a Tale of Two Cities pastiche, and the villain straight up quotes Dick fucking Cheney. But, that's another rant for another time. Again, I've got a lot of them. Very well. But consider this. Thousands died during that climactic action set piece, and Superman should have saved them all. What representative of truth, justice, and the American way would dare be so negligent? And don't start with that "it's his first day on the job" line. No one buys it. Not even at fire sale prices. Oh, don't worry. I'm going to go about it another way. With philosophy. In the book Superman and Philosophy, Andre L. Anton writes, quote, "It would seem that the greater capabilities and responsibilities people have, the less impressed we are when they fulfill them, and the more upset we are when they don't." I'd like to meet Anton, just to ask him if he's been through any intrinsic field subtractors, because he was clearly seeing the future when he wrote that. What would be, in any other film, completely unremarkable scenes of the villain terrorizing a populace to gain audience ire, instead became, in this film, the most remarked upon scene of devastation in 2013. A year, I'll remind you, that contained both World War Z and Pacific Rim. Meanwhile, in this movie, General Zod drops one end of his cryptoforming machine on Metropolis, and the other end in the Indian Ocean. The film goes out of its way to explain why Superman has to go to the Indian Ocean and take care of that end of things first, but most people would rather be insulted by that than ameliorated. I will say that the World Engine is an impersonal and entirely bland threat, as opposed to General Zod. But that's not the problem I hear drawed over, oh no. The problem is apparently that at least 5,000 metropolitans metropolitans, lose their lives while Superman's half a world away fighting a giant robot spider. All those deaths are supposedly on his head, despite the fact it's our military-industrial complex that really fucking fails here. Because Superman can do so much, not even his successes are allowed to explain his failures. Sure, he saves the 7 billion other people on the planet from getting choked to death as the atmosphere changes around them. But how does that count? That's way too abstract for an audience of Americans, constantly re-traumatized by 9/11, whenever it's convenient for us. Seriously, you guys, I know it's tough to believe, but Metropolis has seen a lot worse than this. Lex Luthor leveled the whole damn place in 1994, despite the presence and combined efforts of 3 heroes with an S on their chest. Pray to whatever god you believe in, they find a better way to handle it than the comics did. If they wind up adapting Zero Hour, I'm sure every single one of you is going to go nuts. A very evil part of me, so evil, in fact, that I completely disassociated myself from him and embodied him as my own evil arch-nemesis, would like to ask. Do you mean, gasp, that the gratuitous property damage in a superhero film actually affected you? Moved you to something other than amusement at the antics of rich neurotics, or godly man-children, whose only relatable trait happens to be your shared crush on, Natalie. Yes. Yes, perish that thought. Consign it from your mind. Please, go back to regarding these as nothing more than mindless entertainments. Consume. Submit. How about no? Fine. But are even you fool enough to argue against the dictum that Superman does not kill? You know, that's funny, because the Superman film immediately before this, an animated straight-to-video production called Superman Unbound, climaxes with the death of its villain, Brainiac. Brainiac is naught but a sentient computer program. Superman's killed him plenty of times, and he's never died on us before. Now, that much is true. Clark can punch all the robots he wants, and nobody bats an eye, no matter how artificially intelligent they may or may not be. That's why 2007's Superman Doomsday turned its titular monster into a robot, which was one of my big problems with that movie. It chickened out in a way its source material did not. But Superman totally killed his evil clone at the end of that one. With kryptonite gas, no less. Now hold your nose and look at Superman Returns again. As he's lifting Kryptonite Island out of the sea, Kal Penn and Lex's 2 other henchmen, whose names we never actually learn, get crushed by some falling rock. And I bet they thanked God for that, or they'd have flash fried on their way out of the atmosphere, or died sucking vacuum when they got into space. But, I'm getting something through the Force again. I already know what you're thinking. That was Superman Returns. And hey, fair enough. If we go back in time further, in Superman 4, we see him casually dropping Nuclear Man into a nuclear reactor, and somehow not causing a horrific cataclysmic meltdown in the process. You know, that could have been the Superman versus Godzilla crossover some of us always wanted to see, but we can't have nice things in this world. But Nuclear Man was a freakish pseudo-clone created by Lex Luthor's mad science. Neither the first nor the last. So? He's not a fucking robot, that's for sure. I don't want to talk about Superman 3, just thinking about it makes me want to start drinking. So let's go back to the big counterexample, which is Superman 2. Where our hero throws that General Zod down a Star Wars-branded bottomless pit, smiling while he does so. You could argue Non kills himself in that one, and Lois decks Ursa, so technically that one's hers. But Superman depowered all of them with the radiation emitters in the fortress walls. So hell, any half-decent DA would pin all 3 of their deaths on his ass. Add Man of Steel's oh-so-controversial ending to the list, and Superman's total comes to 9 dead bad guys in 8 movies, an average of 1.25 kills per film. So the statement, Superman doesn't kill, is demonstrably false, and has been since the 80s. At least. By the standards of every other American action hero under the yellow sun, his kill count is fucking paltry. But it does exist. And I haven't even mentioned the 1 or 2 comic books my fellow superfans always trot out in these discussions, or the 4 or 5 others I could trot out if I actually wanted to take this seriously. Yet people walk around saying Superman doesn't kill, because it's an article of faith, and as such it cannot be argued with, even when you wave comics in their faces. Be prepared to hear things like, oh, that doesn't count, that's an Elseworld story, or oh, that doesn't count, that was the Golden Age, people were stupid back then. That's why making this review feels like an exercise in futility. I know going in that I'm not going to change anyone's minds. I'll only serve to alienate the normals by A, calling them normals, and B, showing them just how fucked up and petty we comic book fans really are. Look at the bullshit we argue about, and the bullshit ways we argue about it, and then we have the gall to turn around and wonder why we still can't get no respect. Now, some of my fellow superfans are a little bit better at choosing their words. They'll say Superman shouldn't kill, which is a statement I used to agree with wholeheartedly. Until I thought about it for 10 plus years and change. Now I realize that statement reveals nothing about anything except the speaker. They want this to be true. Sad fact is, it's almost impossible to let a villain live in a major American film. Do that, and you risk the audience leaving unfulfilled, creating even more bad word of mouth than 6 months worth of people shitting all over your teaser trailers already created. The smarter audience members will dock you points for blatant sequel baiting, and these days they'll be right 99.9 with a little line over the top % of the time. Even the dumb ones know this is America, where all of our heroes are killers. Most of us just try not to notice. Some of us revel in it. And how dare this pretentious Superman film force us to reconcile that fact? Suffice it to say, I thought this particular superheroic murder was both effective and affecting. I'm especially glad they went for an inarticulate scream of anguish instead of the usual no, especially since Snyder already gave us 2 superheroic no's in Watchmen. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's okay, guys. Superman's hands were already blood red long before David S. Goyer got a hold of him. That's probably not very comforting, but here, let the power of Lois Lane's crotch heal you. Speaking of Lois, holy new gods! This film was a dream come true for some of us. Finally serving up a Lois Lane who was smart enough for us to like her from the outset. Forget the will they or won't they bullshit these characters usually do whenever their continuity restarts. This Lois goes from meeting Clark in the Arctic Circle all the way to his parents' front door in 10 minutes of screen time, and it is glorious. Of course, it gets her extraordinarily renditioned by the military-industrial complex once one of her fellow journalists rats her out, but that just gives her good reason to participate in the rest of the plot. Something Lois Lanes in the past have struggled with. And hey, both Lois and Clark get extraordinarily renditioned, abducted by aliens, and mind probed together. That's a first date if ever I've seen one. Great basis for a relationship.
As if you've actually seen one. Regardless, this film is too dark, and/or grim, and/or gritty, whichever adjective has the most negative associations for you, you scythe-wielding edgelord.
Really? You want to do this? Because, we can do this. The Marvel Cinematic Universe takes place in a world that really is ruled by dudes who sit in dimly lit rooms, which Captain America the Winter Soldier has since revealed to be genuine bona fide neo-Nazis. And yet you call this dark? Why? Because the color palette's muted? Not once does anyone in Man of Steel contemplate nuking a major American city. I'm sorry, guys. I can't even really take this one seriously either. I want to end on a high note, talking about other stuff I liked, like Lawrence Fishburne in the role of Perry White, an inspired choice I knew would be awesome the moment I heard about it. And if you can't see the benefit of putting Lawrence Fishburne in your movie, please donate your eyeballs to science, because you're clearly not using them. I'd also like to praise Michael Kelly as Steve Lombard, who surprised me with his awesomeness. Steve's been a staple of the Daily Planet since Time Out of Mind, the jock douchebag in the office who got to give Clark Kent shit once that stopped being Lois's full-time job. Both of them needed more to do, no doubt, but that brings up one criticism I never see anyone make anywhere. This movie should have been longer. I'd suspect at least a half hour got left on the cutting room floor, even if this weren't a Zack Snyder film produced by Warner Brothers. They've done it before, and they would do it again just 3 short years later. But we were being positive. What else do I like? Harry Lennox as General Swanwick, and Christopher Maloney as Colonel Hardy. If I didn't mention him, Law and Order fans would crucify me. I like how, when he shoots Feora, she smiles the way you smile at a kitten that just attacked your pants leg. Aw, gas-fired projectile weapons, how cute. Then they pull out their knives, and Feora says something that's very Klingon. A good death is its own reward. A sentiment most colonels would instantly agree with, I'm sure. So Hardy's fully prepared to throw down, but not today. Today is not a good day to die, because Superman is here to save your ass, for no reason whatsoever, other than it was the right thing to do. If there is such a thing as a core to his character, that's it right there. Everything else is superficiality, so don't try coming at me with the whole Zack Snyder just doesn't get Superman line. The first scene, in which we see adult Clark on that fishing boat near Not Deepwater Horizon, contains a complete understanding, not just of what Superman is, but of the spirit he represents. In that scene, Clark's walking over to pick up a pile of rope, either not knowing or not caring that the crab cage over his head is about to drop. A more seasoned sailor sees it, though, and tackles Clark just in the nick of time. He calls Clark a dumbass and a greenhorn, but he's a crabber. What do you expect? The point is, he saw what he thought was someone in trouble, and he rushed in to help. Again, that's Superman. Jor-El, or Jor-El's ghost in the machine, tells him he'll give humanity an ideal to strive for. But Clark knows that this is entirely backwards. From his perspective, all he's doing is striving to be an ideal human. One who acts for the good of those around him, selflessly and instinctively. Selfless sacrifice, by its very definition, entails the sacrifice of your own moral integrity. I don't agree with Perry White's assertion in the next film that the American conscience died with Robert, Martin, and John. But I do know that our morality is far more conditional and dictated by circumstance than we like to admit to each other. Doing so is too grim or dark or cynical for most people to handle, except when we're talking about other people. Their morality must be consistent at all times and under all circumstances. If it's not, we get to call them bad people and feel better about ourselves for doing it. And this, in case you're especially thick, is why Jonathan Kent tried to keep his boy down on the farm, relatively safe from the rest of the human race and their expedient hypocrisies. But Jonathan Kent was wrong. Hell, Jor-El was wrong too. And you know what? That's okay. Their kid found a way to square both the circles they tried to draw around him and escape. Not to lead us anywhere, but to join us in the sun. Or as Lois says in the film's last line, which was probably the first line anybody thought up, "Welcome to the planet." And goddamn, it's good to be here, Lois. Good to finally get all this out, even if absolutely nothing comes from it. Sorry it took so long, you guys, but hey, we made it.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't think you've quite alienated everyone just yet. No. Isn't there something more you could do? Something to make all your fellow nerds turn their backs on you.
Well, there's always this film's sequel.